Why is employee experience so important, especially in today's working environment?
I mean, I would say it has always been important, but
Yeah,
we were able to ignore it
that's a
because
good way of saying it. Yeah.
the market was different, the talent market was different, and also for a company like Siemens, when I started, it was like you can be happy to join the company. Yeah, put this on your CV, and you will put up with any maybe not perfect experience in your onboarding because you can for Siemens. Yeah, I don't know if it's like that for Google or Tesla or Apple these days, but and now it's you turn around a little. So you need to make sure that people have a good experience before they join, when they join, and while they're actually in the company. So I think that the pandemic led us to the necessity to listen. It's kind of if we don't listen, then people will leave, and it's also a changing generation. I mean, I have kids; they have different expectations to their workplace than
Yeah.
I did when I graduated from school, and really need to make sure not to lose those talents to another company because it's just the the ominous war for talent is going on. It's always been going on, but it's raging even more. So I think it's kind of a necessity, but it can also turn your place into a better place to work for everybody.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Tobias Dennehy, who's a singer, songwriter, and head of people experience at Siemens. During the episode, Tobias talks about the crucial role of employee experience in the modern work environment and the key factors that influence it. He talks about the impact of leadership in shaping employee experience and the tactics that guarantee a positive experience in a remote work environment. Tobias, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for having me.
How's the view from Harvey Specter's office?
It's just great as always. I'm looking at all of my record collection in that office, and I'll call in Donna in a second to bring me some.
Yeah. For those that are listening on the audio, Tobias's background is the background of Harvey Specter's office from Suits, which is always hilarious. But you positioned it perfectly where it kind of looks it looks
Good,
real.
yeah.
Oh, you've got a chair behind you,
I
yeah.
could sit like this,
You have to stay there still the whole episode, though.
Yeah,
It'd be pretty
yeah.
tough.
I'll have a backache after the podcast.
Yeah. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and your journey to where we are now. You didn't have the most traditional route, from what I saw, looking at your background on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what traditional is, I mean, I think things are changing
That's
rapidly
true.
into what is the right way to go. And yeah, I mean, but my journey so far, I don't know if you call it a career. I think also the definition of career is changing. Yeah,
Everything's changing.
it used to be, I don't know, the old 80s song from Yazoo, "The Only Way Is Up." Yeah,
Mm.
that's kind of the traditional way. Probably you were thinking of, you start somewhere and you go up, and the bigger your box is, the more successful you are. So I was more like, after looking back, what I've been doing for many years, I borrowed the term crab walk from Günter Grass, a famous German author from the Tin Drum, you might know him. And basically, that's how he looked back on his life, yeah, saying, okay, it's not always one direction, but you go to the side, you learn something here where you didn't think you would see it, and then you go in that direction again. So it's kind of this
Yeah.
walking like a crab, and that's basically where my path has been so far. So I started off as a journalist. That's where basically when I was at school, so working for a newspaper, traditionally writing stuff and taking pictures, and then studied journalism and German literature way back in the days, the last millennium. And yeah, and then basically made some steps from going from journalist to the evil side of power to PR. At least the journalists and my fellow students considered it that way.
Yeah.
Working for a company and doing some PR. I worked in an agency, .com boom times online agency, and then I joined at Siemens. Also, a long time in the digital communications area of digital marketing, and then moved a lot into storytelling because that was kind of my passion, always has been, and it kind of connected after a couple of years. Hey, stuttering literature wasn't completely useless or just fun. It's actually there's some analogies to business life, yeah, and I went into the business storytelling stuff and was fortunate enough to spread this virus within the company Siemens as well. Did some freelance stuff on the side, consulting, whatever. And I've been always someone who wanted to change whatever they do every couple of
Yeah.
years. Yeah, and then suddenly it was one of those points where you say, "Oh, what's coming next? What's coming next?" Yeah, and then it's either I'm going to leave the company or I'm going to do some, be self-employed, or maybe there's a new opportunity within the company. And the latter then happened, and suddenly I was government affairs representative for Siemens for Asia Pacific,
Yeah.
as I had never ever even heard of, let alone qualify. But that's a good thing about a company like Siemens; you can just also try things and get onto the job. And then suddenly I was up in suit and tie and giving business cards with two hands to Chinese ministers. No, not ministers. I'm not allowed to see them, but mayors or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was an exciting couple of years spending in Asia and with Asian colleagues here. Yeah, and then again, a couple of years were over, and I thought, what's next? And then I thought about diving into the HR field, where again, then there was a job offering or a new job, which at least at that time for Siemens was new. It was new in the industry, which was called head of employee experience.
How did you find that? Was it like within your internal marketplace that came up? Did someone come to you directly? Just out of curiosity, I'm always interested to hear.
Yeah, it's a combination of both. Most of the times, the interesting stuff you definitely get pinged towards by somebody who knows you, who said, what, I've seen this. This might be interesting for you. So I didn't have it on the radar at all to move to HR. But then I saw this and I thought, it's interesting because it's a new upcoming topic, and I've always been in favor of bringing new topics into the organization which people don't know yet. Yeah, and try to it's hard because you have to educate them and say, what this is. It's not just another fad. It's really something good. Let's do it, and it takes some time to build it up. But that's what I found really exciting about the topic. And then there was also, for me, there's a lot of connection to storytelling.
I was about to say, yeah,
the whole experience stuff. So the everyday stories our people are experiencing, that's basically what I'm trying to listen to every day. I applied and I was lucky enough to get the job, and it's been 2 years, but it's still the beginning.
How do you describe, like, for someone new to this space, how do you describe your job?
I always say, I try to explain it the way my grandmother would understand it, but she's not around anymore, so I can't do that. I mean, my main ambition and job is to listen, and in order to be able to do this, and it's not that I'm talking to every of the 300,000 people at Siemens, it's more you use infrastructure like surveys and data and dashboards and stuff like that in order to gather responses and what people have to say about their everyday experiences. And basically, on a technical term, I make sure that we get the right answers from our people to understand what they expect from work every day, which means surveys. Yeah, so we regularly, continuously survey already a couple of very crucial experiences or moments that matter, as they say.
Yeah.
But also looking into not too many of those, but context sensitive, so the surveys are not just a nuisance, but maybe a little bit relevant into the context where you are right now. Then basically make sure that the data gets gathered in a dashboard that people who are not that data savvy can also understand what it tells you, and then ideally identifying pain points and leading that to action and improving experiences for the future. That's kind of in a nutshell what and we're not by far have we covered the whole people journey yet.
Yeah. You're getting there. You kind of also you came into this role at a very interesting time where work itself was fundamentally shifting due to the pandemic. Like it was, obviously this was an important topic beforehand, but it has been accelerated. Why is employee experience so important, especially in today's working environment?
I mean, I would say it has always been important, but we were able to ignore it.
That's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
The market was different, the talent market was different, and also for a company like Siemens, when I started, it was like, you can be happy to join the company. Yeah, put this on your CV and you will put up with any maybe not perfect experience in your onboarding because you can for Siemens. Yeah, I don't know if it's like that for Google or Tesla or Apple these days, but and now it's turn it around a little. So you need to make sure that people have a good experience before they join, when they join, and while they're actually in the company. So I think that the pandemic led us to the necessity to listen. It's kind of, if we don't listen, then people will leave, and it's also a changing generation. I mean, I have kids; they have different expectations to their workplace than
Yeah.
I did when I graduated from school, and really need to make sure not to lose those talents to another company, because it's just the the ominous war for talent is going on. It's always been going on, but it's raging even more. So I think it's kind of a necessity, but it can also turn your place into a better place to work for everybody. And it's not. I mean, it's not necessarily that it's always a good thing to keep people the whole of their life
Mm-hmm.
at a company. Yeah? And it's also
Sure.
that different countries, different mentalities. In the US, people are much more into changing jobs regularly than in Germany. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So it's also looking at it from very regional cultural perspectives, and then having not one fits all solution, but at least getting the basis for knowing what people expect. And I think that's why we chose not to have like once a year a big baseline survey around onboarding or whatever, but really have it into a continuous flow, so we can also build up some kind of a radar.
So
Yeah,
how,
so
how
do some
often you doing that then?
every time that it happens. So basically, the moments we survey, we have a trigger point in the system, and we know it's happened. First day is a good example. First day +7. Every new hire around the world gets a short survey asking them, how was it to
Mm-hmm.
prepare to begin for your
Just
job, how was the first day, and all that. So it's kind of in the context or in the moment that people are in. That's when they get the survey,
again, the
and
moments that matter.
every
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, and that's also the whole idea of predictive experience management, if you want. So kind of over time, it's not only looking back, oh shit, now we understand what went wrong, why people
Yeah.
are leaving. It's
Yeah.
maybe also now we understand why they left, and maybe if we change the experiences, we can prevent this happening.
Or after 2 years and of doing this, and many, I'm sure, surveys and conversations along the way, what would you say are some of the key factors that influence the employee experience?
So I think the key moments are, in one way, clearly defined also, by the industry within recruiting, onboarding, offboarding. So there's a couple of moments that are clearly moments that matter, and that's the ones you need to
Mm-hmm.
capture. But then talk to also people from other companies, and quite a number have employee experience teams. Some of them actually create experiences, or kind of, let's create a great onboarding app so everybody has a great experience,
Mm-hmm.
but without listening. So it's kind of this thing that we were also always good at, being engineers building the best stuff out there, yeah, and then being surprised why people don't like it. Because maybe if you listen first, you know what they want and what they don't want, then you
Yeah.
can custom tailor it a little. So I think the most important factor is actually to have listened, and then seeing, what are the expectations people are having and are happy about, which not, and then kind of fill those gaps and not fix anything that's not broken. Yeah, so there's often been initiatives, we need a new or whatever.
Yeah.
We don't do we? So it's kind of putting your efforts where it's actually needed. So that's kind of one of the, I think, most important factors before you even do anything. And then it's continuously listening. And I also think it's not good enough just to gather the data. Of course, a lot of my job is making things transparent, putting it in dashboards and explaining to people, what do they see and what do they not see, and but then the next step is the most important one, right? Bringing it to action. And so I think an important factor is also to have kind of, if it's literal teams or virtual teams, whatever, it doesn't matter, but to have action squads
Yeah.
in place that actually then, take the pain point XYZ. I'm going to work on this and make sure that it gets better, because and maybe the third factor, and that's also something where we're not perfect at yet, is to give a feedback channel to people when they participate in surveys. And they get quite a number of surveys throughout the fiscal
Yeah.
year. Also give them some feedback loop as a kind of, not only thank you for participating, but hey,
This
so
this is what
one
we're
one
doing.
example, yeah, this is what we're doing. We heard you. We're working on this, and maybe then even show some results a year later. So for me, one minor example at the beginning of COVID, with when at least we started working with Microsoft Teams, and it was at the beginning was okay-ish, and then it got better and better, and they kind of recall them having, like call outs on the top right saying, hey, many of you told us XYZ. We've listened, and now look up there. Here's the button that you were asking for. It's kind of this
Yeah.
example, but it's kind of the idea of, we've been listening, we're working on it, and now we have it in there. Tell us if you like it. So it's kind of closing the loop. And sometimes the surveying part might feel like a one-way street for people,
Yeah.
participating in, and then nothing happens, at least nothing tangible. Yeah,
So otherwise, the next time you send one through, they're like, well, what's the point
yeah, exactly.
of me doing this? I'm not hearing
Yeah,
any or seeing
it's
anything.
always rightfully also management here is very cautious about survey fatigue or over surveying, which I totally get. Yeah. But I have the hypothesis that people are not survey fatigued, that they're maybe non-action fatigued in a way that it's not. I mean, if I participate in one survey per week, that's 50. No, not 52. I'm not working every week, but it's many surveys. But if every single one of them fosters some change, or I get feedback and say, hey, my voice was heard and it's worth it, I wouldn't have a problem doing that
No, it's
every
true.
week. It's better than having 2 a year and nothing happens. So I think it's kind of this feedback loop that also needs to be.
You mentioned leadership. What's the role of leadership in employee experience?
When we look at the employee experience or people experience fear, we look at different kinds of touch points that we ask for. So there's the human touch points, the digital ones, and the physical ones. I think when it comes to the more emotional experiences, like the sense of belonging, inclusion, all of this, being recognized and all of that stuff, that probably will not be done by a tool or an app or a website. It's something where leadership plays a key role. But also, I think it's something where you cannot just say, hey, dear leadership team, community, times are changing. Make sure that people have good experiences. They maybe don't know what the hell you're talking about. Yeah. So also kind of having them look at their people's time in their team from this moment that matters perspective and say, you know what, this is what they're actually going through. And you are in the responsibility always to make sure you understand how they experience it, to give them a good experience, because then, of course, they probably will be better, perform better, and be more engaged and whatever. So I think it's a key role they are playing in also in listening. Yeah, so it's a lot about communication and listening to your people, specifically in these hybrid times. Yeah, when somebody comes on board, whether it's a new hire from somewhere else, from another team, or you as a manager, suddenly take over a new team. How do you make sure that this turns into a team? I think it's a lot about listening and taking them seriously. So yeah, I think it's a key element into those more emotional moments. Yeah,
I can imagine, right? Most people's employee experience is massively impacted by their line manager, because you always hear what's that saying we always hear, like, people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers, something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course, because I think setting the scene, setting the tone, that's what a manager of a team does. Yeah, basically, do we have a trustful working environment, or is he or she a control freak? Do they trust you, whatever? Do they really seem to care about, when you say, no, I'm not feeling that good today? Is it always like, yeah, so it's a lot about how does a manager act or react to things that are happening, and maybe that's just from my personal experience. Teams have become we've always been an international company, so there's always been team members which are not in the same location.
Yeah.
As we are, in terms of, you used to be in the office every day with your whole team, but that's become even more extreme since people are now also, they might not be that far away, but they work remote anyway. So my boss, for example, doesn't live in the same city. Yeah. So how do you? I think that has also changed. I think the influence of the manager on your everyday experience has changed. I wouldn't say decreased, but I mean, I remember my old jobs when you were in the office every day with the team and the boss.
Yeah.
Of course, there was much more interaction, and many things, also smaller things he or she did, had an effect on you. Now, half of the time, of course, I don't see him. But that could also make those fewer encounters that you have even more relevant. Just as relevant as it used to be, but it's changed completely. For example, I mean, what I think is so important, even though it might apparently steal your time, is that if you have a Teams meeting for half an hour. Why not spend the first 5 minutes on chatting? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You never did, at least I noticed that 80% of the meetings they're on point and on topic, and let's do it. We only have 25 minutes. And that's something in the office you mostly never did. You were there 5 minutes before, maybe in front of the room getting a coffee and chatting. And that's something I think also a leader can deliberately
Be
enforce without
intentional.
making
Yeah.
it too routine, though with whatever check-in websites that can be a little tedious at
Yeah.
times.
On that point, what are some of the strategies and things that you and the team have done to improve the remote experience?
So we were having within a bigger department, we're having actually a workshop of those people, at least who were in the vicinity of the headquarter here, and just thinking about how are we going to move forward. Yeah, are we gonna go to the office everyone 1 day per week? Are we gonna do it flexibly, whatever? And then in the end, from a department perspective, it was pretty clear that it needs to be individual. So every team within the department said, "No one will. We work differently. Whatever. There's not a one fits all." So that's when it drilled down to our team. And since the team was within Germany, but it's not in the same place, so we wouldn't ever get the chance to have a team day. So that was out of the question. You wouldn't travel just
Yeah.
for 5 kilometers just for 1 day. Yeah, so it's more like having the regular digital touch points. Those people are in Munich where I am. We try to meet on the same day just to meet up and catch up for lunch or whatever. And then it's basically that my boss, for example, every second week he spends a couple of days here deliberately. That's when we are here, so we meet once a quarter. We meet for longer workshops. Say, okay, this is let's just, it's not only work, but it's also some casual stuff, going for dinner, going for bowling or whatever, just to have some fun in the afternoon. But maybe in the morning, just say refining your strategy and what are we working on. So we don't need to talk about what you're working on every day, but it's more like let's have a perspective for the next year or whatever. So it's kind of a mixture of, but having it more or less casual. Yeah, so that's the thing. That's kind of the thing that, at least for our team, it works very well because nobody feels like restrained or forced to do anything that doesn't really also fit into the, let's admit it, changed work not work-life integration. It's more than work-life balance. Yeah, it's kind of integrating the two of them or them blending into one. And
so you're basically
nice
team by team. So like you've kind of let every individual team decide how they work.
At least that's how we in the department here within the bigger department chose to do it. Of course, that's up to every different team or business at Siemens to decide for them. So there's not one
policy.
I mean, there is.
You don't do you have a policy specific? Or do you have what is the remote work policy specific?
I mean, the guidance that was given out, I think that was just 1 or 2 months after COVID started, which was pretty. At least it was noticed in the press, and it was pretty courageous at the time. Say, okay, as of now, 2 to 3 days home office is fine. It's not a rule, but basically, of course, you should come to the office.
Again, it's guidance, not a policy. It's a good point.
Exactly. But that's also something that reality might change this estimation over time. But at least it was the notion that very, very shortly after the pandemic started, things will never go back to the way they were before. So in this notion, kind of giving this framework of flexibility that you were actually allowed to do it, because in former days and the different jobs that I had, it was always dependent on the manager you had.
Yes.
He or she trustful that you were not just laying on the couch at home and watching movies, but actually working. And if they had that trust, they said, yeah, fine, sure, work from home tomorrow. And if they didn't, then you were not allowed to. This is kind of a guiding framework where also leaders cannot say anymore, you have to come 5 days a week, because it's just, it needs to be possible to do it. Of course, you just can't do whatever you want. It needs to work with the job you need to do, with the team you're in, whatever.
But you're trusting people to make that decision. That's the thing.
Exactly.
And that's part of the culture as well.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm not, as much as I'm not too big a fan of bullshit bingo and, whatever high level messaging or a company sometimes has, we do have some interesting focus topics that the company gave itself, or strategic priorities, when the current CEO took over almost 2 years ago, and Two of them are pretty obvious. The one is your customer impact. Of course, that's one you need to go if you work for a company like Siemens. And the other one is technology, but technology with a purpose. It's also a development from just, doing the best possible, but having a purpose for society, whatever. But the other two of four are people topics.
Yeah.
And the one of them is growth mindset. So to really enable the organization through learning and development. I think Robert and Daniela
Yeah.
also been talking about this. So this is kind of one of the aspects. How do we develop a growth mindset in the organization? The other one is empowered people. And of course, it sounds like, everybody can and everybody can put it on their PowerPoints. But I think that's what you were just mentioning.
Perfect example. Let people make the decision. Yeah, trust them.
It's part of this. Yeah. How do I want to work? I mean, I'm a grown up. Yeah. So I know what my job is, and I get paid a salary, and I'm prepared to work for it. So trust people that they do it. Yeah, and also trust them how they do it, and only if things go in a direction where they might be problematic or whatever, then interfere maybe with some guidance as a leader. But I think this empowerment is a lot about, I trust you to make the right decision. Go ahead.
And that massively shapes the employee experience when you have.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's also when you then look at maybe the one or the other experience that I might be having every day is not perfect. If the rest and the general feeling that you have is good, then you basically ignore the fact that reimbursing the travel expenses is not effortless. It's a lot of effort, and it really makes you doesn't make you happy. But then you say no, whatever.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Nothing's ever going to be completely perfect, and people have to understand.
No, because I mean, and that's also something I think we are learning, and large organizations are learning, specifically also German engineer-driven companies are learning. You don't need to produce the perfect solution before you actually put it into the market. If it's an internal or external market, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you're actually willing to, put out an MVP
and listen.
Iterate as you scale things, and maybe do it wrong quickly or whatever, and just see how does it. Because once you build the perfect solution, the world has already changed, and it's not perfect anymore. It was perfect for yesterday. So it's kind of this being much more flexible. I don't like the word agile because it's just so much used, but
that's also something that HR has had an issue with in the past. For the longest time, they would never put anything out unless it was perfect, and they would take 2 to 3 years to build something, and as to your point, by the time they release it, it's already out of date. Whereas the pandemic proved that we could innovate and pivot quickly. We had and even now we're still learning, and it's constantly we're going to evolve and adapt and to individual people's needs and organizational needs and societal needs as well. So I've seen HR become a lot more bold, a lot more brave, and understand that we're going to put it out. We're going to listen. We're going to learn. We're going to take feedback, and then we're going to and work that way.
And I've always been a great fan. Also, when I was working in the marketing or storytelling, co-create stuff with your people. Yeah, sometimes we used to try to do that with stories at the time and videos or whatever. That was small stuff, but also in the HR or the people and organization environment to co-create future experiences together with the people, not just say, hey, we've listened, now we'll create the perfect thing, throw it out there, and then hope it's great, but maybe take them along the way to actually co-create there.
You mentioned the storytelling piece. Give us some practical ways that you've been telling stories, and because that's such an important part of this piece.
One of the key aspects for telling a good story, at least in the business environment, is to know your target group. Tell stories differently for the TikTok generation than you do for the Facebook generation, let alone for old people like me. Yeah. So it's just that's just one example where you really, and it's again about listening. So I mean, if it's about transformation in a certain business or digital transformation, it's not just like telling, oh, the world is changing and whatever, and if you don't change along, then you won't be around anymore tomorrow, so let's change together. It's more like trying to understand the different worlds and lives and environments that people are in. And I'm not too much a fan of the idea of personas, because it's also kind of just a crutch to try and understand people. But sometimes it's helpful to say, this type of workers within Siemens, this is the experience they are having. And if you come with this communication, they will either not understand it at all, or they will just be like upfront, oh, they're telling me I'm going to be irrelevant tomorrow. Whatever. So it's kind of the how of the same story can definitely differ, and to actually draw the parallels between the experiences people are made. That's why and I think that was it's just a semantic move, but I think it was the right move not to talk about employee experience anymore, but people experience, because we're not employees. I mean, employee is just a technical term for because you have a contract with a company, but we're all people or humans. I mean, if those people are not human resources, but you can only do this if you try to understand who they are. I mean, you don't need to understand every single person with their individual story. That's a little bit too much. But I think the parallel between telling a story that resonates in normal communication and marketing, it's just the same. So I think what did you say? More than half of the time, I communicate in my job. I don't build surveys. I talk to people, explain what we're doing, why we're doing, why. I mean, you can also what we also did for the intro now, kind of you can produce a short video showing different, but that's again stories, So we took a video, produced like an animated video of 3 situations, somebody working at the company, and 2 bad experiences, 2 good ones. So you really get the feeling of, this is what they mean. So something like you come to the office on your first day, your boss isn't there, nobody knows you're coming, you sit somewhere. It's kind of this thing, yeah. We go,
but in a very easy to consume,
right.
understandable
Yeah.
way.
So I think that's how you explain the general idea, and then for the more interested expert target group, you can then go into other details. But it's about taking people seriously and listening in.
Yeah. Where do you see like the future of the people experience function and the role being?
Again, as always, there's no one fits all. I mean, I think it needs to at some point evolve into, at least in bigger organizations, it needs to become more part of the actual organization as well. Kind of, and so I'm dreaming of kind of a network of people experience experts in different businesses in different countries that actually are able. So I think one thing that, and again, I'm talking about larger organizations, I would probably not recommend building up a big bubble headquarter team of 20 employee experience people driving this from there, because it's actually, that's not where the experiences happen. They happen at places out there. Yeah. So it's more like
having people on the ground who understand.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would be, I think from a headquarter perspective, it's fine. It's just me. Currently, it's just me. I think that's still fine. But building a network of like-minded, mandated people in the most important countries, the most important business, who then work with the data and bringing it to action and to life. And so I think people experience, probably in terms of future, it's probably more than it is now. So currently, when we think of employee experiences, these flashing moments that matter, touch points, measuring. So it's, but maybe actually people experience is the overall listening. Yeah. So maybe, because also an engagement survey gives you some indications about how people are feeling and maybe about their experiences in the end. So I think it's maybe more about the people experience being what listening is. We're also looking at, I mean, if you look at passive data out there, it's also kind of an indication for if people move from A to B to C or they don't. It's also kind of an indication. You correlate this with surveys you have. So I think it's more this holistic way of looking at people data, which I would at some point say this is people experience, whereas at the moment it's a little bit more narrow.
It's an exciting journey ahead. Like you said at the beginning of the conversation, we're really just at the beginning of this, aren't we? We haven't even spoke about the environment, how that affects the employee experience.
Oh, absolutely.
The communities that you sit within, right? The country, the customers, everything we said.
Everything,
yeah.
The challenge is, so on the one hand, we're just at the beginning of the journey, and it's almost 2.5 years for us now. We're still at the beginning, so we need to be in it for the long haul. We need to really also be patient. Until until we have enough data to read something in, until we change it, whatever, until it becomes bigger and bigger, or at least things happen. On the other hand, we're in such fast-paced times where people and also management need to see results much earlier, and that's kind of an area where you don't see results after a month just starting a survey. Yeah, you could give a dashboard to people, but then they would see 10 people answering maybe, and they would conclude, oh, shit, we need to, but you don't because it's not represented. So you need to wait. And so it's getting things off the ground as quickly as possible to win time
Mm-hmm.
until you can actually really show. So I think that's kind of a little bit the paradox situation where building something up which really will take some time until
Yeah.
it's evolved.
Well, I was just about to ask you what would be your parting piece of advice. That was already a good piece of advice, but what advice after doing it for 2 years now? What advice would you give to leaders that are perhaps starting their journey in this? In terms of what you've learned and what you've been through, what advice would you give?
So I think it's starting small while you in the background build up some infrastructure to be able to scale it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a lot about communication, talking to your peers, but also spreading the message top down also helps. And yeah, so I think not reinventing the wheel and not starting to think that this is something completely new and you would basically the organization needs to do a U-turn, but try to add it on to what you have. Most companies already have engagement surveys and see how this can hook onto this and be integrated. And yeah, be patient and yeah, be bold just to do it and try and see what happens.
Love it. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on and joining us.
Absolutely.
Where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to reach out, say hi? Where's the best place? LinkedIn?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn is the easiest space, and I'm not there 24/7, but regularly. Then the next steps can be taken from there.
No worries. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on, and I wish you all the best until next
Yeah,
week.
thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Great fun.